Ghosts, dinosaurs, and a monkey trapped in the lost world. It's all coming up on a brand new episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, America's place to hear horror films discussed by an animated talking cat. We've got a good one for you tonight, a film that I've been wanting to review for a long time. It's another ghost story, so this will make at least 3 ghost stories in a row we've done this season on Spooky Tales. We'll get to that in a minute, but first we've finally been able to make contact with our missing cast member Crimson Meerkat, so we're going to take a minute to check in with him. Hey Meerkat, are you there?
Yes, Steve, I am here. Still here, in fact. I had expected to travel back to Steve the Cat headquarters by now, but it seems I am stuck here. I was hoping that you could tell me what was going on.
Well, first, how about we get you to introduce yourself and tell us where you are, and then we can get to all of that.
Okay, fine. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Crimson Meerkat, and I am the expert on all things related to conspiracy theories and alien abductions here on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. I was working on a method to prove the existence of aliens when suddenly they just showed up and abducted my colleague, Malcolm Fluffosaurus. After he was abducted, the aliens released him in the mountains of West Virginia for reasons that were not clear at the time. As it turns out, the West Virginia mountains have an underground entrance to the land of the Hollow Earth deep, deep underground. I came to West Virginia to rescue Malcolm and ended up trapped in here. Malcolm's here too. He's assimilating better than I would have expected.
So what are things like down inside the Hollow Earth?
Well, in a word, dinosaurs. Malcolm is right at home because the place is absolutely crawling with dinosaurs. You see? Here comes one now. It's wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling dinosaur jamboree, and I would very much like to leave now.
Well, it turns out we were able to talk Penelope, our Vice President of Human Resources, and she's confident that we can find room in the budget to bring you home in next fiscal year.
Wait, next year? But it's only May. You expect me to stay down here for 5 more months?
We talked about that too. I told Penelope that was unfair because you would have to use up all your vacation time waiting for the rescue. The good news is that she agreed, so you'll be drawing a full salary while you're down there.
I would say thank you, but I'm sure there is some sort of string attached, so why don't you just go ahead and tell me? What's the catch?
Well, PBDC-TV currently has no presence in the Lost World, so she sees it as an opportunity for expansion into a growth market. So while you're there, you'll be in charge of establishing a PBDC-TV affiliate down there in the Hollow Earth.
There's dinosaurs down here! Dinosaurs everywhere, and there's no electricity! How am I supposed to set up a PBDC affiliate without electricity?
Penelope said you can make up for the lack of electricity with creative marketing.
Creative marketing? We're a television network. Without electricity, we're literally nothing. How am I supposed to market literally nothing?
Well, that's what makes it creative.
Oh, I see. This is all a setup, isn't it? You've been planning to trap me down here from the beginning. The whole thing with Malcolm was just a ruse.
Oh, no, we wouldn't do that. This is just what Penelope calls a happy accident. This gives us a chance for PBDC-TV to establish a foothold before one of the major networks moves in. The BBC has been really aggressive about expansion lately. Penelope thinks they're the ones that bankrolled that whole wrongful death lawsuit against us and sent that bounty hunter after you.
Those fiends! On the surface, they're all smiles and baking shows, but underneath, they're all business.
So how's Malcolm getting along?
He is assimilating surprisingly well. I thought he would be lost without Netflix and DoorDash, but he's really starting to fit in. He's found a dinosaur pub and hangs out there almost every night. In fact, it's becoming a problem.
Wait, a problem? Is he drinking too much?
No, but he did do one of his freestyle raps on open mic night. Naturally, the crowd loved it, and he's performing 3 nights a week now. Dinosaurs. Tiny brains, no taste in music.
Well, I'm glad to hear he's doing so well. I'm sure he'll be a big help in setting up the new PBDC-TV affiliate.
Oh, of course. Of course I have to work with the rapping dinosaur while I'm down here. It's just one indignity after another. You do realize I am a published author, right? I have published 3 books, and I have a 4th book coming out if I can ever get out of here and get back to my publisher. But you don't care. You just see me as the pawn to use in your little drama. Well, I've had enough. I'm going to bed. Meerkat out.
So, Crimson Meerkat is alive and well and flourishing in his new home deep inside the Hollow Earth. So I'm sure he'll do a great job setting up a PBDC TV affiliate for the Lost World. But now that we've checked in with Meerkat and given the latecomers a chance to tune in to join the live watch party, it's time to get down to the business of horror movies. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad to have you along. Now grab your popcorn and have a seat, because here we go.
Who's she?
Well, for now, she's a Jane Doe.
Are these all people?
Just 3 tonight.
Can I see one?
Found her in the basement of the Douglas's place. No ID, no fingerprints in the system. You got something?
Nothing was stolen. Not a scratch on the outside of the house either. Doesn't look like someone broke in. To me, it looks like they were trying to break out. What's that for?
Make sure he's dead. There used to be a time it was hard to tell a comatose person from a dead one.
Press is gonna need answers on this in the morning, and I got nothing.
It's her. Everything was fine until Brooke wheeled her through that door.
Sam.
Until we cut into her.
You're talking about a corpse.
First, they bound her. Then they ripped out her tongue, poisoned her, paralyzed her, forced her to swallow the cloth. Then the cuts, the internal mutilation, stabs. Then, as if that wasn't enough, they burned her.
That's why we couldn't find cause of death. She's still alive.
Okay, let's get to our featured film review. Tonight we are talking about a film called The Autopsy of Jane Doe. This is a supernatural horror film and one of my favorite supernatural horror films. It was released in the year 2016, directed by Andre Øvredal, and the cast includes Emil Hirsch and Brian Cox. Let's get into setting our expectations for this film. If you're going to sit down and watch The Autopsy of Jane Doe, what you should expect is a small scale but very well executed supernatural horror film. Small scale in the sense that there's only 2 people in the cast for most of the film and only 1 location used for much of the film. If you like The Conjuring, you'll probably like The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and to a lesser extent, if you enjoyed Paranormal Activity, you might enjoy The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Although Paranormal Activity is more of a found footage film, Autopsy of Jane Doe is not a found footage film, but they still have similar supernatural sensibilities. Let's get into calibrating your sights if you want to sit down and watch this film. This is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale we have very campy films such as the very silly Jason X. On the far right we have very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. As always, the scale is not an indicator of the quality of the film. This is an indicator of what your mindset needs to be going into the film if you're going to enjoy it. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a serious film. There's no doubt about that. There's no comic relief. There's no jokes. This is a serious film. The only reason I don't put it on top of The Silence of the Lambs is it deals with the supernatural and is slightly fantastical from that sense. Now, before we go any farther, we need to do our vocabulary lesson for the evening. Our vocabulary lesson is the part of the episode where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. Social media bots and algorithms are always evolving, therefore our language must evolve to stay ahead of them. Our first term is a review term. It's called accent clonking. Accent clonking is a sort of onomatopoeic term. It's a noun referring to the action of striking a character in the head with an axe or hatchet, thus making a clonking sound with the application of the axe. Colloquial forms of this include firewood splitting, although that is more of a seasonal variation. That's something you see used with Christmas horror films more often than not. Our second term for this evening, one we have done recently, is enfuegoinating, but if you're new to the show or just need a refresher, enfuegoinating is a noun referring to the action of setting a character ablaze. And colloquial forms of this include baked Alaska-ing and Richard Pryoring. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a summary of this film. The film's not too hard to summarize when you get down to it. It opens with a police investigation. The police are investigating a mysterious multiple homicide in rural Virginia. They find an unidentified woman's body with no apparent cause of death. So the sheriff sends the body to the local morgue for an autopsy. It's one of those small towns where the funeral home is also the morgue, and the funeral home director is also the coroner. Needing them to establish a cause of death by morning. The sheriff knows that there's going to be a media firestorm about whatever has happened the next day, and needs to at least have a cause of death so he knows something to tell the press. The coroner and his son, who is also his assistant, begin an autopsy of the unidentified body. And as the autopsy proceeds, strange things begin to happen. So that brings us to our villain profile for the week. Our villain for this week is Jane Doe. We don't know who Jane Doe is. We do see her throughout the film, but we don't ever really find out who she is. Jane Doe is, well, frankly, we don't know what she is. She's of the unknown class, although it is most likely that she is some variety of witch. Her special powers are invulnerability of a sort, plus the ability to make people see things that are not there. And her signature technique is that Jane Doe traps her victims inside a house or building and then unleashes her powers upon them.
And now a word from our benevolent overlords at PBDC TV, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
You are found guilty of witchcraft. You are found guilty. You are found guilty. Witchcraft. You are found guilty.
So let's talk about the things I liked about this film. Right off the bat, it's a creates a spooky atmosphere full of tension and suspense. It is a very suspense-filled film. The story is original and not as predictable as many horror films. It's not as formulaic as a typical slasher film or even as a typical ghost story might be. There's a little more flexibility to the story in this one and a little less of knowing what's going to happen from one moment to the next. The film is well acted and it is very well directed. It features excellent practical special effects for the autopsy. And overall, it's just a well-executed film that prioritizes suspense and atmosphere over action. So it's not an action film. This is a film for somebody that wants to sit and have a little more of a tension-filled slow burn. Things that could have been better about this film, and as always, these are not necessarily criticisms of mine. These are just criticisms that could be raised about the film by somebody. The film is a bit slow and not a good choice for somebody needing a lot of action. So if you need a lot of action to keep you stimulated, this is not the film for you. At the end of the day, this is primarily the story of two people trapped in a house with a supernatural force. And frankly, there's only so much you can do with that creatively. So once again, if you need a lot of action and a lot of jump cuts and a lot of different action sets to keep you interested, this is not the film for you. The vast majority of this film involves two characters trapped inside a house with some sort of supernatural force. There's only so much you can do with that. The film does use smoke and rapid camera cuts to hide some of the practical special effects, and so it's a little obvious. It's not that it looks bad, it's just that it's pretty obvious that in using the rapid camera cuts to try to build suspense, they're at the same time trying to hide some of their practical special effects. And finally, how did Jane Doe get to that crime scene in the first place? It's one of those things that I haven't really been able to puzzle out. Maybe I just need to watch the film again to get a better idea. The thing about this film is you're pretty much dropped into the middle of a story and you pretty much leave in the middle of a story. You don't see it from the beginning, so we don't see what causes the multiple homicide that leads to the discovery of the body. We don't see what leads to the discovery of the body. We don't see what happens to the body after the autopsy. We just kind of see what goes on during. So you don't get a lot of closure from that point of view. And the only real thing that stuck in my craw about that was, how did Jane Doe's body get to the crime scene in the first place? But I guess it's just one of those mysteries that doesn't get explained as the film goes on. So let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film. Right off the bat, kills. I counted 5, and that does include rats and cats. Bare breasts, drum roll please. They are continual. It is a live actress playing the role of Jane Doe, and she is naked throughout the entire film. Denogginings. You get none. Nobody loses their head in this film. Jump scares. I counted at least 5 before the action got going in the second half of the film. Bonus items found inside Jane Doe. I counted at least 3. There are at least 3 bonus items found inside Jane Doe, much like she is a box of Cracker Jacks. Mercy killings. I counted 2, once again including cats. Axe and clonking. I counted 1, and there's an asterisk on that because it was not a direct impact to the head, so technically not an axe and clonking, but close enough that we're going to score it as 1 for this film, so 1. And finally, Infuegoinatings. Once again, we had 1. But with your viewing of the Autopsy of Jane Doe, you also get some bonus features, such as a rock and roll autopsy action. You get morbid fascination with the morgue action. Yes, Austin's girlfriend is a little fascinated with the morgue and a little too fascinated with the morgue for my taste. You get creepy corpse bells. You get, Austin, just go on the date already. This is my advice to you. Don't worry about helping out with the autopsy overnight. Go on the date with the attractive redhead. You get rib snipping action. You get cat cremation action. You get cryptic writing on the inside. You get what happens when you try to burn an invulnerable witch in the first place. Well, it's not that you can't set her on fire, but, well, you just have to kind of watch to see what happens. You get walking corpse action. And finally, if you have an autopsy, you know you're going to have skull sawing action. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. I'm going to give it 3 paws out of 4. I'm kind of surprised that I did not give this 3.5 or 4. It had been a while since I watched this film, and it was a bit slower than I remembered, and just not quite as overwhelming as I remembered the first time around. So it could be just that I am too used to the film. But 3 paws out of 4. I'm going to say this is a well-acted and well-directed supernatural horror film filled with tension and suspense. It makes excellent use of a small cast and small location, and it may be a little too slow for those who need action. So this is not an action film by any means. It is more of a psychological, supernatural, slow burn kind of film. But if that's your kind of thing, you can do a lot worse than The Autopsy of Jane Doe. This is one of my favorite supernatural films. And as I said, I am surprised that I'm not giving it a higher score, but I walked away from this doing my review yesterday thinking it's 3 paws out of 4. So we're going to rate it as 3 paws out of 4. That is The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and that is our featured film review for the evening.
Yeah.
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. It's your boy Sleepy. And when I'm not guzzling down gallons and gallons of amazing ice cream, yes, oh, I love ice cream. Oh, hang on. I'm watching PBDC TV. Now, back to the show, all you beautiful people. And remember, stay nasty.
We've reached the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, but before we go, as is our tradition, we're going to take just a minute to talk about some other things I watched this week. This week, I watched, drumroll please, yes, I went there. I actually went there and watched Terrifier 2. I had no intention of ever watching this film, but it became available on Amazon Prime and I decided to go ahead and give it a try. So, we're going to talk about Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2 is a 2022 American slasher film, so it was just out last year. And the film continues the story of Art the Clown that began in the film called All Hallows Eve and continued into the standalone film Terrifier. All Hallows Eve and Terrifier we've reviewed before on this show. That really could be the entire review of the film right there. There's not a whole lot more to this film. But we'll talk about it a little more. Following the events of Terrifier, Art the Clown is mysteriously resurrected and resumes his bloody work. And if you've seen the previous films, you know what that bloody work consists of. If you have not, just understand that it is gore on top of gore, violence on top of violence. Art's primary focus in this film is Sienna and her younger brother Jonathan, who holds what may be the key to stopping Art the Clown. Jonathan has a mysterious sketchbook that was left to him by his father that seems to have information that could lead to the origin story of Art the Clown and possibly the end of Art the Clown. So what do I think of Terrifier 2? I've said before, I was not a big fan of Terrifier when I reviewed it. All Hallows Eve and Terrifier, not really my cup of tea, but I did. They're good films for somebody who's into that kind of film. So what I will say about Terrifier 2 is, first of all, be warned that this film is every bit as over-the-top gory and gross as its predecessors. And it's not just gory and gross, it is hold my beer gory and gross. basically trying to outgory and gross anything that anyone in the theater might have thought of before they come in. I haven't cringed like this since The Human Centipede when I watched a movie. That said, you kind of know what you're going to get before you watch. It's a cornucopia of gory violence for its own sake. Terrifier and Terrifier 2 are two films that you just have to know going in if you like it or not. It's one of those things where a review doesn't necessarily mean anything to you. If you like a lot of over-the-top gore and violence, you're going to enjoy Terrifier 2. If you don't, you will not enjoy Terrifier 2. In fact, I recommend you stay away from Terrifier 2 unless you are outright a fan of the series. Now, on the pro side, director Damien Leone makes a concerted effort to develop the characters of Sienna and Jonathan, much more so than in a traditional slasher film. So you get a lot more character development and a lot more depth in this film than you would have in, say, a Friday the 13th kind of film. On the con side, it's just too long. It goes on for over 2 hours. Now, maybe that was necessary in order to do the character development, but it just is too much. The film goes on for far too long. Overall, I don't recommend this film unless you're a fan of the previous films. If you are a fan of the previous films, you will be thoroughly satisfied with this film. If you are not a fan of the previous films, this one will not change your mind. If you have not seen the previous films, I do not recommend them either, but will say that if you're the kind of person that enjoys graphic, grotesque violence for the sake of graphic, grotesque violence, those films certainly deliver. So if you're just looking for a practical special effects festival on screen, that's basically what you get with any of these films. So that is Terrifier 2. That is other stuff I watched this week, and that is a wrap.
Well, that wraps up the spring season for Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you here. Now, if you did enjoy the show, please check us out on social media. You can find Steve the Cat on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, so please stop by and hit that subscribe button. And of course, Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is available exclusively through the PBDC Collective Incorporated, your heartbeat of horror. You can find us on the web at psychobunnydc.com, or you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, and Discord. The Discord site is a members-only site, which gives us the opportunity to do some fun things for our members-only audience, but it means that you do need to join ahead of time. So if you're interested in joining the Discord site, go to psychobunnydc.com, click the link for an invitation, and we will get you all set up. Now, this is the end of our spring season, so I really want to thank everybody for joining us over the last couple of months. Now, we will be back in the fall with more new episodes, but we're going to take the summer off, as is our tradition. So until that time, have a great summer, and we will see you in the fall. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Good night, everybody.